So, okay, we are actually going to now switch directions and go from Texas A&M and Kevin Sumlin to the Big 12. And the reason why we're talking Big 12 football today, and I feel like we've kind of had this conversation before, but it's a conversation that's not going to go away until the Big 12 decides to do something. There was an article on ESPN from Jake Trotter, a staff writer for the Mothership, and it was 10 candidates that the Big 12 could use in an expansion. And Brandon, the one thing I thought when just seeing this article was this has to happen. I've said it before, I'll say it again. This has to happen. The Big 12 needs to add at least 2 more teams, because if you add at least 2 more teams, you can have 2 divisions, and then you get a Big 12 title game back, and then we're not talking come playoff time, well, they didn't win their conference title game.
Yeah, Ricky, how many times last season did we talk about that? How many times last season did we talk about them to add teams and how it didn't make any sense that they were the Big 12 with 10 teams? They don't have 2 different conferences. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. This move absolutely would make sense if they do it.
Yeah, and I mean, the teams that I look at, I don't know about you, Brandon, but the 2 that I see from this list of 10 that Trotter points out there, because I'll go off of his list first. 2 of the teams just from his list that I feel like could make the most sense. The Houston Cougars, because look at what they've been able to do. They haven't been a pushover, but now that they have Coach Tom Herman there, this is a team that is on the rise. 13-1 last season. They're probably going to be just as good again this year because Tom Herman is doing what a head coach needs to do, and he needs to create a culture, and that's what he's done at Houston. I wouldn't be surprised if someone gets fired, and we're talking about Tom Herman maybe taking over the Aggie job, but they would bring in revenue for this conference. They would strengthen rivalries within the state of Texas. You already have Baylor. You already have Texas. You did have Texas A&M. So what's not adding another Texas team to this conference? And then Memphis, because the thing, I know that geography is getting thrown out the window with some of these conferences. I use the Big Ten as the big example, pun intended, where they added like Maryland and Rutgers to try to get that northeastern market into their conference in order to increase their revenue and just get a different fan base, and with the alumni being in the Northeast. So to me, it's easy. Houston and Memphis are the 2 teams you have to target if you're the Big 12 at the least. I don't know about you. What teams would you say, boom, the Big 12 needs to add these guys into their conference?
I think those 2 absolutely make sense. I think, what about like a Boise State or something like that could go in there as well?
Yeah, I mean, Boise State to me, the only thing I have against Boise State is they don't seem like that same team that Coach Peterson had. You know what I'm saying? Like, when Coach Peterson was there, it was always, oh, this team should be in a Power 5. This team should be in a Power 5. They lose them. It's like, okay, 9-4 last year.
That's true. That's true. I think the other 2, the 2 that you mentioned, I also agree with both of those. Those make the most sense. I think that my question is, why has it taken so long? Why has this taken all the way till now to happen? It doesn't make much sense to me, because those 2 teams, I think that almost everybody who understands anything about college football and regions, which should be mostly everyone because everyone should have been taught that in school, why has this not happened as of today? Like, we're still waiting for it to happen. Why has it not? Why has it taken them so long to finally go, oh my gosh, we have one hell of an idea, even though everyone sitting around them has been saying, yeah, we've had that idea for years, buddy.
Yeah, and I mean, the one thing that kind of puzzles me is it's kind of two things. And I look at an article here also by Jake Trotter where it just reads Oklahoma Regents chairman opposes Big 12 expansion. And it's confusing because the Oklahoma president in David Boren he's been the most vocal advocate for a Big 12 expansion. And he's been saying that, and I quote, that the league would be psychologically disadvantaged until they return to 12 members, because that to me is the bottom line of it. You're called the Big 12, and you have, like, it's different if you're the Big 10, but you have 14 members, because it's like, okay, you added some more. But if you're the Big 12 and you have 10 members, that's where it sounds bad.
Yeah, it certainly does sound bad. I mean, that just looks bad. Why you only have 10 members? You detracted from what you had before. I mean, you no longer even can live up, like you said, to the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
12 is a conference you should be able to bolster up. You should have people just wanting to come in, which they do. They have the people who want to come in. For some reason, they're just not allowing it.
Well, and I mean, the one thing I was going to get to also is Max, and I hope I'm going to say this name right, or the chairman for Oklahoma's Board of Regents, but Max Witzenhofer, he's on a different... It's weird, though, because Boren, who's the president in Oklahoma, is in favor. Witzenhofer, the chairman of the board at Oklahoma, is against it. And the quote that I'm going to use from Witzenhofer is, "I just don't feel expansion is in the best interest of our football program based on all the accomplishments we achieved last year, both on the field and academically. I see no need to increase the size of our conference." End quote. You know what I do if I'm the college, and I don't want to say this, but I am going to say this. You know what I do if I'm the college football committee this year when I see that quote?
What do you do?
I go, okay, guys, unless the Big 12 goes undefeated, they ain't getting in. Not getting into the playoffs unless they go undefeated. That's what I see there, because the big thing with this expansion is the only reason that I think Witzenhofer is saying this, I'm going to call it garbage. He's saying this garbage is because Oklahoma got into the playoff. If Oklahoma wasn't getting into the playoff, what accomplishment are you talking about on the field? What accomplishment are you talking about? So to me, I see it as, fuck it. Unless you go undefeated, you ain't getting in. Now what accomplishment do you have? However, the side of me says you can't do that, because then you're putting an entire conference. You're putting the TCUs, the Baylors, the up-and-coming Texas team. You're putting all of them at a disadvantage. You're punishing them because of one asshole at Oklahoma.
He doesn't want expansion. He doesn't want any more competition.
That's it.
For competition. He likes being able, like you said, he likes being able to have his accomplishment, get in, and everything like that. If I'm them, if I'm Oklahoma, and I'm as good as I think I am, and I do, I think Oklahoma's a pretty good team, I welcome it. Bring on more competition. We'll continue to show you how good we are.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, and I mean, you can even look at it this way. Missouri, they're not there anymore. Nebraska, they were pretty good. They're not there anymore. Texas A&M, they were pretty good when they were at the height of getting better. They're not there anymore. So it seems like these teams are getting good in the Big 12, and if you don't expand and make the division and the conference tougher, teams are going to leave because there is no more loyalty in college football for conferences. If that was the case, we wouldn't have this expansion talk every single offseason. You know what I mean, Brandon?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's got to come a day when we don't have this expansion talk anymore. They just do it. I don't understand. I keep saying it. It really kind of makes me irritated because I still don't understand why is it so difficult to just add a couple of teams, get back to an actual Big 12 team league, and that's what you got. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. Why do we have to continue these conversations? There, I think, are more than enough people who are in favor of doing this, of expanding. Just take a freaking vote. You're going to have more people than not who are in favor of it, and do it. You are hurting, possibly and probably, hurting college football in that sense. Stop doing it.
Well, and the one thing I want to quote, and this goes off of a point that you made, why you said Witzenhofer made these comments is because of competition. In the Jake Trotter article, where he gives the 10 candidates for the expansion, I'm just going to quote it and read it verbatim because I can't say it better than Mr. Trotter. He says, and I quote, this is the case against Houston being in the Big 12. He says, and I quote, though Houston is one of the top media markets in the country, the Big 12 already has a strong influence there. Texas probably would be against bringing in another school from within its own state it would have to recruit against, especially given the SEC's recent encroachment into the state. Houston's potential in the Big 12 would be significant, which in this case might work against it, end quote. And to me, I read that and I go, it pains me. Because if you're a good team and you finish 13-1 in your conference, why should you have to stay in a shitty conference and not be able to make that next step? All because a big brother and I'm going to say Texas because that's who Trotter mentioned, because a big brother like Texas says, no, we don't want to compete with you. Or like in Oklahoma says, we don't want to compete with you. It kind of goes back to we're not going to schedule this non-conference game in your building because if we lose, it's going to look really bad. It goes back to that even conversation of just why are you so afraid of these teams? I get it, you may lose, but you should want to welcome that competition like you were saying.
I agree with you. It's all about competition, and apparently what we're hearing, it sounds like it's other teams, these teams that proclaim to be so good, the media mogul, they're getting all the media coverage, everything like this, all these teams proclaiming all these great things about themselves. It's those teams that are afraid of it, and that's pretty sad.
And the last thing I'm going to mention in this discussion is there was an article put out. It was right after I sent you today via email the topics that we were going to talk about on the podcast today. It's an article by Ryan McGee. It'll be down in the description for you guys to see. He came up with if every single Power 5 had 16 teams, and you can check it for your favorite conference, but right now, just because we're talking about the Big 12, I'm going to tell you, Brandon, what the Big 16 would be consistent of, and it would be 2 divisions, the North and the South. Here's who would be in the North. So the teams from the Big 12 that would stay in the North: Texas Tech, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Kansas, Iowa State. So that's what, 14? No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams. The other 2 that would be additions, you'd get the BYU Cougars, and then Air Force would be your 2 additions to that conference. On the other side, Baylor, Texas, and Texas A&M are the only people that are staying. And then you would have SMU, Tulane, Houston, Rice, and New Mexico. And that would make up your 16-team Big 16.
I mean, that's interesting. I don't know how likely that would be to happen. I think that at this point, we're more likely to just get 2 more teams added to the Big 12, and that's going to be like pulling teeth as it is. So maybe we should hold off on a Big 16 for now.
Well, yeah, I just think it's cool just to look at the article and be like, wow, what if we did have 16-team power conferences, and what would that be like? But yeah, this needs to happen, and this is the part of the conversation. I want you guys to tell us down below what you guys think, because this is a kind of topic where everyone has their own opinion. Everyone's got their own opinion of what teams should be added. I want to know what you guys think. Let us know down in the comment section.